Motion in your step.
Motivation in your heart.
Hello, and welcome to today's Motion and Motivation podcast.
We've put together a study guide for everyone. If you need it, you can grab it from the video description.
Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Ready to explore some power dynamics?
Always ready.
Today, we're taking a look at Jeffrey Pfeffer's book, 7 Rules of Power.
Yeah, this is a good one.
I know you've read this. I've been digging into it, too. I'm excited to kind of pick it apart and see what we can learn about navigating those sometimes tricky office politics.
Right. It's like everyone knows those dynamics exist, but nobody wants to talk about it.
So let's talk about it. Pfeffer doesn't really sugarcoat anything. He gets right into the psychology of power. So let's dive right in with his first rule, get out of your own way. I mean, this one hit home for me.
Yeah, same here.
Who hasn't dealt with imposter syndrome at some point,
Right. You feel like you don't deserve to be there.
Exactly. And Pfeffer actually shares a story about Christine, a consultant he worked with, who's clearly super talented, MBA, the whole 9 yards, but just constantly downplayed her achievements.
Oh, I remember Christine. Always apologizing.
Yeah. And she was the youngest person and the only woman on her team.
Which,
Yeah.
that can be tough.
Really tough. So she kind of let those factors just totally undermine her confidence.
It's classic self-sabotage. You get in your own way.
So what did Pfeffer suggest she do? How do you climb out of that hole?
He told her to focus on empowering self-descriptors.
Instead of being like, oh, I'm the youngest one here, or I'm the only woman here, she should be focusing on her MBA, her amazing analytical skills.
Right. Highlight the positives. Own your accomplishments. Don't shy away from them.
So how do you actually put that into practice? It's easy to say, be more confident, but how do we make that happen?
Pfeffer suggests a really practical exercise. He says, analyze your self-descriptors. Pay attention to how often you apologize for things, especially when you don't even need to.
Ooh, I do that a lot. Sorry to bother you at the beginning of emails.
All the time. Or downplaying your accomplishments in meetings.
Oh, it was nothing, really.
Those little things add up. They chip away at your perceived power without you even realizing it.
It reminds me of Christina Troitino, who Pfeffer talks about in the book. She's the YouTube employee who basically crashed an exclusive dinner at Sundance.
Oh yeah, Christina. That's a great example of his second rule, break the rules.
Right. She saw an opportunity and just went for it, totally breaking those social norms to make herself appear more important.
And it worked.
So wait, how did she even get in? That dinner was invite only, right?
It was, but she walked in with confidence, like she totally belonged there. She even started conversations with some pretty high-profile people.
Bold move.
And that's the point. By breaking those unwritten rules, that social etiquette, she created this aura of importance around herself.
So I get that it was a power move. But how does rule breaking actually translate into real power? What's going on there psychologically?
Okay, so Pfeffer explains that there are a few mechanisms at play. One is scarcity. Things become more desirable when they're rare or hard to get.
Like those limited edition marketing tactics.
Exactly. Then there's reactance theory. If you tell someone they can't do something, what happens?
They want to do it even more.
Bingo. And finally, there's this idea of volitional capacity, which is basically the perception that someone has the freedom to do whatever they want.
Okay, so by breaking the norms, Christina sort of manufactured this aura of scarcity and volitional capacity. She's someone who doesn't have to play by the rules, which makes her more interesting and, powerful.
Exactly. It goes back to Pfeffer's point about the power of asking. We so often assume rejection, but people are surprisingly willing to help if you just ask.
It's easier to get forgiveness than permission.
Kind of. Think of Keith Ferrazzi, the guy who straight up asked the head of Deloitte Consulting for yearly dinners with him as part of his job offer.
It was so bold, so unexpected, it just worked.
Exactly. It's about recognizing your own power and not being afraid to use it. And that ties in nicely with Pfeffer's rule number 3, appear powerful.
Okay, so are we talking about power posing in the bathroom before big meetings? What does appearing powerful actually look like?
Well, there's some really interesting research that shows people make judgments about others based on appearances crazy fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally just from tiny little video clips, people can accurately assess personality traits. It's wild.
First impressions, man, they really do matter. So obviously we can't change everything about our appearance, but are there things we can control, to project that power?
Definitely. There are a lot of nonverbal cues that we can learn and practice, like body language, tone of voice, even what you wear. All those things can affect how powerful you appear.
Pfeffer also talks about the importance of projecting certain emotions, right?
Yeah, confidence is key. But he also says that even anger, like a little touch of it, can actually be associated with confidence and power, which is
Hmm.
kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's like that whole don't mistake my kindness for weaknesses thing.
Right. You don't want to be a pushover, but you also don't want to be a jerk. It's a balance.
So we've covered getting out of our own way, breaking the rules, and appearing powerful.
Hmm.
What's next in Pfeffer's playbook?
Rule number 4 is build a powerful brand. Think of it like you're a company. What would your tagline be? What makes you stand out from the crowd?
I love that analogy. So Pfeffer uses the example of Laura Chow, a venture capitalist who built her brand through podcasting, blogging, and networking.
Perfect example. She's a master of the flywheel effect. She consistently puts herself out there, shares her knowledge, and connects with the right people. And it's created this snowball effect of credibility and connections.
Yeah, and she's not afraid to tell his story, to promote her accomplishments, which I think a lot of us struggle with. There's that fear of seeming arrogant.
Totally. It's the self-promotion dilemma. But Pfeffer says it's crucial to get your work out there to make sure people know what you've achieved. He talks about Deborah Liu, who was a VP at Facebook, and she learned to actively promote her team's work, which led to greater recognition and influence for everyone.
So how do you find that balance between, showcasing your achievements and not being a total braggart?
One way is to have other people advocate for you. Get testimonials, recommendations, press coverage, let your work speak for itself. But make sure people are actually hearing about it.
So strategic storytelling, using those endorsements to build your brand.
Got it.
Which brings us to Pfeffer's rule number 5 network. Relentlessly. I'm going to need a bigger Rolodex for this one.
Haha, right? Networking is so important. It's like the foundation of any successful career. Pfeffer starts this chapter with Omid Kordestani, Google employee number 11. Do you know how he landed that job?
No.
Pure networking genius. He was at a conference, not even looking for a job, and just happened to strike up a conversation with some of Google's founders. He even picked up the tab for dinner. Pretty good investment in hindsight.
Talk about return on investment.
Yeah.
So it's not just about showing up at events. It's about engaging with people, having those meaningful conversations.
Exactly. It's about building relationships. Pfeffer also talks about Ross Walker, who was the youngest person ever appointed to Stanford's Board of Trustees. His philosophy is people are the name of the game.
I like that. So he focused on building those connections early on, even working for free to learn from successful mentors.
Right. He understood that the right relationships could open doors. Pfeffer also emphasizes the importance of weak ties.
Weak ties. So not just your close friends, but more like acquaintances, people you don't see as often.
Exactly. Research shows that those weak ties can actually be more helpful in your career than your close circle. They provide access to new networks, new information, new perspectives. Think about it. Your close friends are probably in the same industry or have similar backgrounds, but those weaker ties, those can connect you to a whole new world.
This is where it gets really interesting. Pfeffer talks about becoming a broker. What does he mean by that?
A broker is someone who connects different groups of people who could benefit from knowing each other. They bridge those gaps in networks. It could be real estate brokers, investment bankers, even someone who introduces two friends who end up getting married.
So it's about spotting those opportunities to connect the dots.
And strategically positioning yourself to do it. Research shows that people in these brokerage positions tend to have better career outcomes. More information, more opportunities, and they're often seen as more valuable.
I'm already feeling overwhelmed. Who has time for all this networking between work and family and trying to get some sleep?
I know, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be a lot. But technology can help LinkedIn online groups. Even just a quick email check-in can keep those weak ties alive.
It's not just building the network, it's actively using it, making those asks, getting those introductions.
Exactly. And that leads us to Pfeffer's rule number 6, use your power. This one can be a bit controversial.
Yeah, sounds kind of power hungry.
But Pfeffer's point is that power itself isn't good or bad. It's a tool. And if you have it, you should use it strategically. Ethically, of course. He uses Lyndon B. Johnson as an example. He was a president known for getting things done often by pushing boundaries and using his influence very decisively.
So being bold, taking action when you see an opportunity.
And recognizing that power can be fleeting.
Mm-hmm.
You might be in a position of influence today, but that could change. Use it while you have it to achieve your goals and make a real impact. Pfeffer talks about how the average tenure for CEOs and other leaders has actually been shrinking. So you got to move fast.
Okay, so use it or lose it, basically.
Pretty much. He gives some great examples of how to use power effectively. Like Amir Dan Rubin, who was brought in to turn around Stanford Hospital. He wasn't afraid to shake things up and make tough decisions, even though they weren't always popular.
So he was willing to ruffle some feathers to get things done.
Exactly. He had a vision and he used his power to make it happen. Another key takeaway is the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people. Bring in your supporters and move out your opponents. I know it sounds a bit ruthless, but
But yeah, but it's not about being mean. It's about being strategic.
right, you need people who are on board with your vision who are going to help you achieve your goals. Sometimes that means making tough calls about who stays and who goes.
So it's playing the long game, setting up systems and structures that will continue to support your vision even after you've moved on, like building a legacy.
Exactly. But Pfeffer also has a bit of a cautionary tale. He reminds us that while power can be used for good, it can also shield people from consequences when they break the rules.
Like a get-out-of-jail-free card for the successful.
Kind of. He argues that we tend to view successful people differently. We attribute their success to positive qualities like intelligence and hard work, which can make us more forgiving of their flaws.
Yeah, it's that halo effect again. Their success overshadows their shortcomings. He talks about people like Elon Musk and Elizabeth Holmes. Despite all the controversy surrounding them, they continue to have huge followings and attract investors.
Right. And it all comes back to cognitive dissonance. We want to believe that successful people are good people, so we rationalize their behavior even when it doesn't align with our own values.
So we compartmentalize their performances over here, their moral character is over there.
Exactly. Pfeffer calls it moral decoupling. We separate judgments about someone's performance from their moral transgressions, which allows us to admire them while still acknowledging their flaws.
It's a fascinating concept, and it explains why some powerful people can get away with things that others can't. Their success shields them. It allows them to operate under a different set of rules. So what do we do with this information? Are we just supposed to accept that power corrupts and successful people are above the law?
Of course not. Pfeffer's point isn't to make us cynical, it's to make us aware. He wants us to be more critical observers of power dynamics and to recognize that success doesn't automatically equal morality.
It's about being discerning, not letting the halo effect blind us to potential problems, and holding powerful people accountable, not giving them a free pass just because they've achieved success.
That's a great way to sum it up. And it's one of the things that makes Pfeffer's book so valuable. It doesn't just describe how power works, it challenges us to think about how we use it and how we respond to it. He also offers some additional insights beyond the 7 rules. He talks about the importance of having a strong peer group, a network of people who can support you and challenge you.
Yeah, he mentions Laura Esserman, the surgeon. She learned to work within the existing power structures even when they felt unfair. And she built a strong network of mentors and colleagues to help her navigate those challenges.
And he shares a story about a group of women from his class who formed what they called a power posse. They supported each other, held each other accountable, and worked together to challenge the status quo. It's a great example of how collective action can empower individuals to create real change.
So we've really gone deep on Pfeffer's 7 rules of power, explored a ton of examples, and unpacked some pretty complex ideas. What are the key takeaways here?
Well, the first thing is that power dynamics are everywhere. They're a part of every organization and every relationship. Ignoring them won't make them go away. We have to understand them and learn to navigate them effectively.
And Pfeffer's book gives us a framework for doing that.
Yeah.
It encourages us to be strategic, to be bold, to build our networks, and to use our power wisely.
But it also reminds us that power is a double-edged sword. It can be used for good or for bad. It can create positive change, or it can be used to exploit and manipulate. Ultimately, the choice is ours.
So armed with these insights from Pfeffer, we can hopefully approach these power dynamics with more confidence, achieve our goals, and even make a positive impact along the way.
Absolutely. And as a final thought, I'd encourage you to think about how these rules apply outside of the business world. Think about politics, social movements, even your personal relationships. How do these power dynamics play out? How can you use these insights to create a more just and equitable world?
That's such an important point. Power is everywhere, and understanding how it works is crucial for anyone who wants to make a difference. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
So we've covered a lot, but there's one more rule we need to talk about, Pfeffer's 7th and final rule. It's called success shields, and it might be the most thought-provoking one.
Success shields. Huh. That sounds kind of ominous.
It kind of is. Pfeffer dives into this uncomfortable truth that success can actually act as a shield protecting people from consequences, even when they do things that are ethically questionable.
So like a get-out-of-jail-free card for the successful.
You could say that he argues that we tend to see successful people through a different lens. We attribute their success to these positive qualities like intelligence, hard work, charisma, and it can make us more forgiving of their flaws, even their transgressions.
It's that halo effect we were talking about. Their success kind of overshadows everything else, makes it easier to overlook potential problems. And he uses some pretty strong examples to illustrate this point. People like Elon Musk and Elizabeth Holmes.
Right. Those are perfect examples. Despite all the controversy surrounding them, they still had huge followings, tons of investors. People were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because of their past successes.
It's like we create these separate mental categories. Their performances over here, their moral characters over there, and we don't really connect the two.
Exactly. Pfeffer calls this moral decoupling. We separate judgments about someone's performance from their moral character, which allows us to admire their achievements while simultaneously condemning their questionable actions.
It's wild, isn't it? Like our brains are trying to resolve this cognitive dissonance. We want to believe that successful people are good people. So we find ways to rationalize their behavior, even when it conflicts with our own values.
It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon, and it helps explain why some powerful people can get away with things that others can't. Their success acts as a shield. It allows them to operate under a different set of rules.
So what are we supposed to do with this knowledge? Are we just doomed to be blind to the flaws of successful people? Is that just the way it is?
Not at all. I think Pfeffer's goal here isn't to make us cynical, but to raise our awareness. He wants us to be more critical observers of power dynamics, and to recognize that success doesn't automatically equal morality.
So it's about being discerning, not letting that halo effect blind us to potential red flags, and holding powerful people accountable, not giving them a free pass just because they've achieved great things.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that power can be seductive. It can corrupt.
Yeah.
And we need to be vigilant about holding those in power accountable, regardless of their achievements.
This has been quite a deep dive into Pfeffer's 7 rules of power. We've covered so much ground, from self-sabotage and imposter syndrome to rule-breaking and networking to the psychology of power and the dangers of success.
And I think the biggest takeaway is that power dynamics are everywhere. They're a part of every organization, every relationship, every aspect of our lives. And understanding these dynamics can be incredibly empowering.
It allows us to navigate these complex situations with more confidence and intentionality, to advocate for ourselves, to build meaningful connections, to use our influence wisely, and hopefully to create a more just and equitable world.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. That way you won't miss any of our updates. Also, if you think this video could help others, please share it with them. Thanks for watching and for your support.